I promised your mother I would take care of you, my love, whatever the cost. The Siberian wind cut like 1,000 blades at 80° Celsius as the 98-year-old Yakuta elder felt her heart freeze, not from the cold, but from terror. Her great-granddaughter, the last spark of her lineage, had vanished into the relentless blizzard. On the pale horizon, a dark, living tide moved. Not one, but 1,500 pairs of hungry eyes glinted in the darkness, wild wolves ready to attack. She gripped her staff, her breath condensing into thick smoke, and took the first step into the snow, a silent sacrifice about to unfold. But what she didn't expect was that the heavens held a secret, and that the true threat was yet to come, before an intervention as improbable as it was fatal. Yakuta's first step sank into the virgin snow, deep and treacherous, swallowing her reindeer skin boots up to her knees. Every fiber of her nonagenarian body protested, her bones creaking under the strain, her muscles burning with an ache that defied the paralyzing cold. The air, dense and icy, made her lungs ache with each breath, but she pulled it in stubbornly. In her eyes, once bright as ice in the sun, now veiled by urgency and love, determination was unshakable. She gripped her staff tightly, the wood worn smooth, an extension of her will and soul. "My little star, where are you?" she whispered, her hoarse voice almost inaudible against the incessant howl of the wind. The promise made to her daughter echoed in her chest like an ancestral drum, a rhythm that guided every beat of her tired heart. Caring for her great-granddaughter was the invisible thread that linked her past to the future, the very vital essence of her lineage. The image of the girl's frightened face, with dark hair framing large, curious eyes, was the engine that propelled her fragile body. Every step in the deep snow was a desperate prayer. Yakuta visualized the small figure, perhaps huddled under a snow-covered bush, trembling with cold and fear, and the vision gave her strength, defying the logic of age and extreme conditions. She could not fail. She would not fail. The 1,500 wolves, a legion of hungry shadows, were not just a distant threat. Their eyes, now closer, formed a glittering, merciless semicircle, a living siege that slowly closed in with terrifying patience. Yakuta could smell their wild, damp scent, an aroma that mixed frozen earth and flesh. The howls, once distant, were now a chilling chorus, a hunting song that made the hairs on her neck stand on end and froze her blood. She knew she was easy prey, a fragile obstacle between them and the child. But her mind refused that fate. Fear chilled her insides, but love was an inextinguishable, burning fire in her spirit. Suddenly, a movement at the periphery of her vision, more subtle and imposing than the pack. 3 gigantic forms, striped black and grayish-white, emerged from the curtain of snow, moving with silent grace and lethality. Siberian tigers. They were enormous, their bodies muscular and powerful, each step sinking into the snow with brutal force. Their amber eyes, deep and seemingly emotionless, fixed in the direction of the wolves, in the direction where her great-granddaughter likely was. The true threat materialized, a majestic and terrible presence that eclipsed the danger of the wolves, making them mere spectators of a new drama. The wolves, when so confident in their numerical superiority, visibly hesitated. Their howls transformed into low, cautious growls, an acknowledgement of the brutal hierarchy of the wild. Yakuta was trapped, a small human figure between 2 fronts of relentless predators, each with its own hunger and power. Her heart pounded like a frantic drum, a rhythm of despair and irrational hope. Fate seemed sealed. The cruelty of Yakutia ready to claim them, but she felt a different vibration in the air, a tension that did not come from the imminent confrontation, but from something larger, about to manifest in the grey skies of Yakutia, a force that perhaps could rewrite the end. The different vibration in the air intensified, transforming into a deep hum that made the snow beneath Yakuta's feet tremble. Her eyes, already accustomed to the icy gloom, rose to the pale sky, and then it happened. As if darkness itself had detached from the clouds, a whirlwind of black feathers spiraled down, a gale of crows, thousands of them, their strident cries tearing through the oppressive silence of Yakutia. It was not a flock, but a living cloud, a winged army that plunged with unexpected and overwhelming fury. The Siberian tigers, who moments before seemed the personification of the supreme threat, were the first to react. Their deep growls turned into roars of surprise and irritation as the crows, with sharp beaks and relentless claws, began to attack them. It was not a direct attack to kill, but a brutal and coordinated assault to blind, disorient, and drive them away. The birds dived and soared, pecking at the eyes, ears, and sensitive nostrils of the big cats. A cacophony of crow cries and tiger roars erupted, echoing across the vast frozen plains. The wolves, in turn, retreated even further, a grey mass of confusion and caution. The scene was surreal. The hierarchy of nature turned upside down, with the small crows challenging the giants of the taiga. The tigers, irritated and wounded by the incessant attacks, began to move erratically, batting their paws at the snow, trying to ward off the winged attackers. One of them, with a crow hanging from its ear, spun violently, knocking down a snow-covered bush and creating a momentary gap in the siege. Yakuta, with the wisdom of her almost 100 years, recognized the gift. It was not a miracle, but the wild ballet of life and death, where each creature fought for its own space and survival. The crows were not saving her. They were defending their hunting territory, or perhaps food that the tigers might steal. But for her, it was an opportunity, a precious window of time that nature, in its unpredictability, had just offered her. Her tired body, which a moment before seemed crushed by the weight of despair, found a reserve of energy. Her eyes, which had witnessed so many wonders and horrors of Yakutia, now shone with renewed cunning. She gripped her staff, using it not only as support, but as an extension of her will. "Now," she whispered to herself, her voice a thread of hope against the chaos. With steps faster than her age would allow, Yakuta began to move, not towards the tigers or the wolves, but towards the gap that had opened in the confusion. The wind still cut, but she barely felt it, focused on her goal. Her focus was absolute. The image of her great-granddaughter, trembling with cold somewhere nearby, was a beacon in her mind. She had to reach her. She had to protect her. Every movement was deliberate, every muscle responding to the urgency of her love. She crept between the frozen bushes, taking advantage of the predator's distraction. The wolves, still in shock from the unexpected fight, kept a cautious distance, their howls now more curious than threatening. The tigers, in turn, were completely engrossed in the aerial battle, their roars of fury mixing with the caws of the crows. Yakuta knew the window of opportunity would be short. Nature was relentless, and the truce was only temporary. She had to be quick. She had to be more cunning than the cold, faster than the danger that still lurked in every shadow, in every icy breath of wind. Her heart pounded, no longer from fear, but from a fierce determination, an ancestral promise that propelled her through the blizzard. Yakuta pressed on, each step a victory over exhaustion and the snow that seemed to want to trap her. The chaos behind her, the aerial battle between crows and tigers, was a distant sound, muffled by the urgency in her heart. She did not look back, her eyes fixed on the white, indistinct landscape ahead, searching for any sign, any clue that would lead her to her little one. Her breath came out in dense clouds, and the cold bit at her cheeks and ears, but she seemed not to feel it. It was as if an invisible shield of love protected her from the elements. Her staff, a loyal companion of so many journeys, sank into the snow, testing the depth before she moved her foot. It was a slow but steady rhythm, the cadence of a lifetime of resilience. The wrinkles on her face, marks of almost a century of relentless winters, seemed to deepen with the tension, but her lips were firm, a thin line of determination. She knew that Yakutia did not forgive weakness, and she would not allow herself any. Suddenly, a small movement at the base of a snow-covered pine tree caught her attention. It was not an animal, nor the wind. It was something subtle, almost imperceptible. Yakuta stopped, her heart pounding harder, a mixture of hope and terror chilling her veins. She approached cautiously, every nerve on alert. The snow was slightly disturbed, and a piece of colorful fabric, a small scarf she herself had embroidered, was half buried. It was her great-granddaughter's scarf. A wave of relief and panic hit her simultaneously. She was close, very close. But where? The pine tree was large, its branches heavy with snow forming a small grotto. Yakuta knelt with difficulty, feeling the pain in her knees but ignoring it. With her gloved hands, she began to clear the snow from the lower branches, revealing a small cavity. And there she was, huddled, a small, trembling figure, her large, dark eyes closed, her face pale and stained with frozen tears. Her lips were slightly blue, and she was barely breathing. The great-granddaughter, wrapped in her small fur coat, looked like a wounded bird, fragile and defenseless. Yakuta felt a lump in her throat, but there was no time for tears. "My little star," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion and cold. With the greatest tenderness her aged body allowed, she reached out and touched the girl's icy face. The skin was cold, but not rigid. There was a spark of life there. The girl shivered and slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the gloom. A small whimper escaped her lips. Seeing the wrinkled, beloved face of her great-grandmother, a thread of hope shone in her frightened eyes. She tried to reach out, but her small arms were too weak. Yakuta hugged her tightly, pressing her against her own body, trying to transfer the warmth that still remained within her. "I found you, my love, I found you," she murmured, kissing the child's icy forehead. The smell of snow and the girl's fear filled her nostrils, and a new wave of determination propelled her. The danger was still there, hanging in the icy air of Yakutia. The wolves' howls seemed to have diminished, but the tiger's roars and the crow's caws still echoed, a constant reminder of the savagery around them. Yakuta knew they couldn't stay there. The window of opportunity was closing. She needed to act, and fast. Carefully, she picked up her great-granddaughter in her arms, feeling the light, fragile weight of the child's body. It was a weight that, paradoxically, gave her more strength. The girl nestled against her chest, seeking warmth. Yakuta looked at the grotto's exit, at the blizzard that was still falling, at the chaos that awaited her. The journey back would be even more difficult, but now, with her little star safe in her arms, she felt no fear. Only an unshakable strength, a promise fulfilled, and the certainty that love, even in Yakutia, was the most powerful of weapons. Yakuta pressed her great-granddaughter against her chest, feeling the tiny, fragile body tremble. The warmth of her own body, though insufficient to fully warm the child, was a balm against the paralyzing cold. With an effort that made her muscles scream in protest, she rose, her staff serving as a third support. The small grotto under the pine had offered temporary refuge, but the true danger still lurked outside. The icy air at 80 degrees stung her exposed skin, and the blizzard, though less intense, continued to fall, transforming the landscape into a white, indistinct sea. The girl, still pale, nestled deeper into her great-grandmother's embrace, a faint whimper escaping her blue lips. Yakuta kissed the top of her head, smelling snow and childhood, and a new wave of courage propelled her, a strength that seemed to spring from the depths of the ancestral land that had seen her birth. The roars of the tigers and the caws of the crows had diminished, transforming into distant echoes, a reminder of nature's fury that had given them a chance. But the silence that followed was not one of peace, but of renewed threat. The wolves, cunning and patient, had not disappeared. Their howls, previously muffled by the aerial battle, could now be heard again, closer. A somber chorus that seemed to close the circle. Yakuta knew that the window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Every second was precious, a grain of sand slipping through the hourglass of destiny. With her great-granddaughter in one arm, she used her staff to clear a path through the deep snow, her eyes scanning the landscape for any shadow, any movement that might indicate the presence of danger. Every step was a battle, an act of pure will. The snow, now heavier with the child's body, sank her boots up to her thigh, demanding a Herculean effort from her tired legs. The great-granddaughter, though weak, clung to her with surprising strength, her small fingers clutching Yakuta's coat as if her life depended on it. And indeed it did. "Grandma," the girl whispered, her voice almost inaudible, but full of a childlike trust that broke the elder's heart. Yakuta smiled, a faint smile but full of love and promise, and held her even tighter. "We're going home, my little star. We're almost there." The words were more for herself than for the child, a promise she was determined to keep, whatever the cost, an oath etched in her soul. The darkness began to deepen, and the air grew even sharper, cutting the skin like 1,000 ice needles. Yakuta felt the cold penetrate her clothes, her bones, but the presence of her great-granddaughter in her arms was a fire burning in her spirit, an inextinguishable flame that defied Yakutia itself. She moved with the wisdom of one who knows every stone, every bush of that relentless land, every trap hidden beneath the white mantle. She veered away from a rocky formation that might conceal a predator, skirted a stretch of thin ice that could give way under their weight. The way back was long and treacherous, but the love in her heart was a guide stronger than any compass, a light in the growing darkness. She continued one step at a time, an elder and a child, defying the merciless vastness of Yakutia, driven by an ancestral promise and unshakable hope, with every breath, with every heartbeat. Suddenly the ground beneath her feet trembled. It wasn't the wind nor the wolves' howl. It was a deep vibration, a grave sound that seemed to come from the frozen heart of Yakutia itself. Yakuta stopped abruptly, her eyes wide, her body tense. Her great-granddaughter let out a frightened whimper and pressed herself even closer to her. A booming sound, like distant thunder, echoed across the plains. Before them, a few meters away, the snow and ice-covered ground began to crack. An irregular fissure, thin at first, rapidly expanded, snaking across the white landscape like frozen lightning. The ice broke with terrifying snaps, revealing a damp, cold darkness below. The fissure widened, transforming into a narrow but deep chasm, a cut in the earth's surface. Yakuta felt her heart race, but instead of panic, an ancestral memory ignited in her mind. Her grandfather, a legendary hunter, had told her about the Earth's breaths, sudden movements of the permafrost that could open and close unexpected passages. The wolves, cautiously approaching, stopped, their hungry eyes now showing confusion and caution before the new barrier. The chasm, though dangerous, was a chance. It was an unexpected turning point, a gift from the earth itself. Yakuta looked at the fissure, then at the wolves, and a quick, courageous decision took hold of her spirit. She saw a narrow passage, a point where the crack was not so wide, where some frozen rocks formed a natural bridge, precarious but possible. "Hold on tight, my little star," she whispered, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. With the wisdom of her years and the agility that urgency granted her, Yakuta adjusted her great-granddaughter in her arms, holding her with protective strength. She took a hesitant step towards the fissure, her staff probing the cracked ice. The danger was immense, but hope was greater. Yakuta felt the ice crack under her staff, a sharp sound that seemed to echo in her soul. The chasm ahead was an open wound in the landscape, an invitation to danger, but also a barrier between them and the hungry pack. With her great-granddaughter nestled against her chest, the small arms clinging to her with desperate strength, Yakuta took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. "Trust, Grandma, my little star," she murmured, more to herself than to the child, whose wide eyes watched the dark fissure. The first step was an act of faith. Yakuta carefully and precisely positioned her staff on one of the frozen rocks that served as a natural bridge. The rock was slippery, covered by a thin layer of ice, and the wind howled, threatening to unbalance her. She shifted her weight slowly, feeling the instability beneath her gloved feet. Every muscle in her aged body was tense, responding to a primal urgency. Her great-granddaughter let out a small whimper of fear, but did not cry, trusting in her great-grandmother's silent, strong resolve. On the other side of the fissure, the wolves stirred. Their howls, once threatening, now carried a tone of frustration. They ran along the edge of the chasm, sniffing the air, trying to find a safer point to cross. Their yellow eyes gleamed in the growing gloom, fixed on the small figure daring to defy nature's fury. Yakuta felt their gaze, an invisible pressure, but she did not allow herself to hesitate. With each small advance, she felt hope grow, a faint warmth against the paralyzing cold. She remembered her grandfather's stories of how the land of Yakutia was alive, breathing and changing. The cracks in the ice were like the wrinkles on her own face, marks of immemorial time, full of wisdom and danger. He had taught her that sometimes the greatest obstacle could become the greatest opportunity. And there she was, a 98-year-old elder, using a fissure in the earth as a shield against 1,500 wolves, driven by a love that defied logic and nature itself. The path over the frozen rocks was tortuous. Yakuta needed to calculate every movement, every placement of her staff, so as not to slip into the damp darkness below. Her great-granddaughter, feeling the precarious balance, squeezed her eyes shut and clung even tighter, her small body a precious and vulnerable weight. Yakuta felt the fatigue, the pain in her knees and hips, but the image of the village, of the warm fire and familiar faces, was a beacon in her mind. She could not fail. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, her feet touched the solid edge on the other side of the fissure. A sigh of relief escaped her lips, transforming into a cloud of vapor in the icy air. She looked back at the newly formed chasm and saw the wolves still running back and forth, unable to cross. The fissure was too wide for them to jump, and the ice seemed too unstable to support the weight of an entire pack. For a brief moment, they were safe, but safety was an ephemeral illusion in Yakutia. The darkness of night was almost complete, and the cold became even more intense. Yakuta knew that the fissure was only a postponement, not a definitive solution. They were still far from the village, and the danger, though momentarily contained, had not disappeared. The wolf pack, with its relentless patience, would eventually find a way. She needed to continue, each step now a new challenge, a new battle against time and nature. Her great-granddaughter, feeling the tension ease a little, lifted her head and looked at her grandmother with eyes full of gratitude and exhaustion. Yakuta smiled, a smile that promised protection and a future, even in the merciless vastness of eternal winter. Yakuta smiled, a smile that promised protection and a future, even in the merciless vastness of eternal winter. But the relief was a faint breath in the frozen air. The fissure had granted them a moment, a precarious pause, but the village was still far away, and night was advancing, bringing with it a denser darkness and an even sharper cold. The great-granddaughter's body, though now warmer from contact with Yakuta's, still trembled slightly, and her small whimpers were a constant reminder of the fragility of life in that land. With an exhausted sigh, Yakuta adjusted the girl in her arms, feeling the weight that seemed to grow with each step. Her own muscles protested, aching and stiff from the continuous effort. The staff, now more a support than an exploration tool, sank into the deep snow, requiring a Herculean effort for each movement. She looked back at the dark fissure that now separated them from the wolves. The howls, once so close, had become more distant, a chorus of frustration and persistence echoing in the night. They were still there, an invisible but ever-present threat. The great-granddaughter lifted her head, her large, dark eyes fixed on Yakuta's wrinkled face. A small smile, faint and tired, appeared on her blue lips. "Grandma is strong," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. The words, simple and sincere, touched Yakuta's heart like a balm. She pressed the girl against her chest, feeling the small hand grip her fur coat tightly. It was this trust, this unshakable faith that propelled her. It was for this little star that she defied death itself. The landscape ahead was a sea of indistinct whiteness, where the shadows of the trees merged with the growing darkness. The wind howled, raising swirls of snow that whipped their faces, momentarily blinding them. Yakuta pulled her hood further down, protecting her great-granddaughter from the icy assault. She knew that every step was a gamble, every decision, a thin line between life and death. But there was no room for hesitation. The wisdom of her 98 years, the experience of a lifetime in Yakutia, guided her movements. She read the signs in the snow, the direction of the wind, the shape of the trees, seeking the least treacherous path, the nearest shelter. The darkness deepened, and the stars began to emerge, dotting the black sky like frozen diamonds. The beauty of the night was cruel, a reminder of nature's vastness and indifference. Yakuta felt the cold penetrate her boots, her gloves, every fiber of her being. Her toes were numb and her lips, cracked by the wind, burned. But the warmth of her great-granddaughter's body in her arms, the soft breath on her neck, was a miracle, a force that overcame pain and exhaustion. She remembered the stories of her mother, her grandmother, of all the women in her lineage who had faced the harshest winters, who had fought for the survival of their families. They were the voices in her heart, whispering courage, teaching resilience. Yakuta was not alone. She carried with her the strength of generations, the ancestral promise, the love that bound her people to that relentless land. The village, with its warm lights and the promise of safety, seemed a distant dream. But she continued, one step at a time, an elder and a child, defying the merciless vastness of Yakutia, driven by an ancestral promise and unshakable hope, with every breath, with every heartbeat. The path was long, but love was the surest guide. The path was long, but love was the surest guide. With the fissure now behind them, Yakuta felt a momentary relief, but the reality of the journey that still awaited them was an overwhelming weight. Every step in the virgin snow was a silent battle, her muscles protesting with each movement. Her staff, her faithful companion, sank deeply, requiring double the effort to stay upright. Her great-granddaughter, nestled in her arms, was a precious burden, her warmth a constant reminder of the reason for her struggle. The darkness of night had completely swallowed the landscape, and only the faint moonlight, filtered by snow clouds, offered some guidance. The wind, an icy whisper, seemed to carry the distant howls of the wolves, which, though muffled, were a constant reminder of their presence. Yakuta knew they would not give up. Patience was a virtue that nature taught, and the wolves were masters of it. She hugged her great-granddaughter, feeling the girl's soft breath on her neck. The child had fallen asleep, exhausted, her small fingers still firmly clutching Yakuta's coat. Seeing the girl sleep, so vulnerable and trusting, ignited a new flame of determination in the elder's heart. She could not fail, not after everything. The wisdom of her 98 years guided her through the shadows. She avoided the brighter stretches of ice, knowing they could be treacherous, and sought out points where the snow was more compact, offering firmer support. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom of Yakutia, discerned the shapes of trees and rocks, using them as landmarks in her slow and painful progression. The cold, at 80 degrees C, was a constant presence, an invisible enemy that tried to steal her strength, her hope. Yakuta felt her toes and fingers numb, even through her thick gloves and boots. Her lips were cracked and dry, and thirst was a constant needle in her throat. But she refused to stop. Every small victory, like avoiding a snow-covered bush that might conceal a slope, was an impetus to continue. Suddenly, a different sound broke the silence. It wasn't the wind, nor the distant howl. It was a dry snap, followed by a low growl coming from an unexpected direction. Yakuta stopped, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes scanned the darkness, trying to identify the source of the sound. Her great-granddaughter, awakened by the abrupt movement, let out a small whimper, her eyes slowly opening. "It's all right, my little star," Yakuta whispered, her voice tense but soft. She hugged the girl, trying to shield her from any threat. The sound repeated, closer this time, and Yakuta felt a shiver run down her spine. The wolves had found a way. They were no longer on the other side of the fissure. They were approaching, and the sound indicated they were exploring the terrain, perhaps a shortcut the elder had not foreseen. A dark, elongated shadow moved between the trees, the unmistakable silhouette of a wolf. Then another, and another. It wasn't the 1500. But a scouting party, the boldest, the hungriest. Their yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness, fixed on them. The distance between them diminished with each second. Yakuta felt despair gnaw at the edges of her courage, but her great-granddaughter's gaze, full of fear and trust, propelled her. She could not surrender, not now. With a new breath, Yakuta adjusted her great-granddaughter and began to move again, faster than before, her steps heavy and urgent. She knew that running was futile, but inertia was death. She needed to find new shelter, a new strategy. The village was still far, but hope, however fragile, still burned in her chest, a beacon against the imminent darkness. She wasn't just fleeing, she was fighting for every breath. For every heartbeat of her little star. Yakuta, with her great-granddaughter nestled in her arms, felt her heart pound against her ribs, a drum of despair and determination. The growls of the scouting wolves were closer now, the sound scratching at the icy silence of the night. She could feel their warm, panting breath, almost on her neck, a palpable threat that pushed her beyond her limits. The snow, once a barrier, now seemed a treacherous swamp, each step sinking her boots up to her knees, robbing her of the little energy she had left. Her knees, fragile and aching, threatened to give way, but the image of her great-granddaughter's frightened face was a balm, an injection of strength that kept her going. The girl, her large, dark eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, pressed herself against Yakuta, a small tremor running through her body. She did not cry, only watched, her silent trust in her great-grandmother a precious weight. "Almost there, my little star," Yakuta whispered, her voice hoarse from effort and cold. The words were a prayer, a promise she needed to fulfill. She scanned the landscape with her eyes, desperately searching for shelter. Anything that could give them a few more minutes, a few more seconds. The darkness was almost total, and shadows danced, transforming trees into monsters and rocks into menacing figures. But then ahead, among a cluster of wind-twisted pines, she spotted a darker patch, a rock indentation that seemed to promise refuge. It was small, perhaps cramped, but it was a chance. With a new breath, Yakuta changed her direction, her steps now more urgent, more desperate. The wolves, sensing her intention, increased their speed, their howls becoming sharper, hungrier. She could hear the crunch of snow under their paws, the relentless chase that separated them from safety. Her great-granddaughter let out a small cry of fear, and Yakuta held her even tighter, her aged body forming a protective shield. The pain in her muscles was excruciating, but she ignored it, focused only on the small, dark spot ahead. She stumbled, almost falling, but her staff, firmly planted in the snow, prevented it. Her eyes filled with tears of exhaustion and frustration, but she blinked them away. There was no time for weakness. The wisdom of her 98 years, the experience of a lifetime facing Yakutia, told her that giving up was death. She remembered her grandfather, who had told her about the earth's breath, about how nature, in its fury, sometimes offered a small opening, a chance for those who dared to fight. The fissure in the ice had been one such opening, and now perhaps that rock indentation was another. The wolves were a few meters away. She could feel their warm, damp breath, the wild scent emanating from their bodies. One of them, the leader of the scouting group, a large grey male, growled, showing sharp teeth. His yellow eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence. Yakuta turned slightly, her body shielding her great-granddaughter, and raised her staff, a fragile weapon against the pack's fury, but a symbol of her unbreakable will. "Back!" she cried, her voice surprisingly strong, filled with an ancestral authority that seemed to echo in the depths of the night. The wolf hesitated for an instant, surprised by the elder's audacity. This small pause was all Yakuta needed. With a final effort, she threw herself towards the indentation, slipping inside, her great-granddaughter's body still firmly pressed against hers. The entrance was narrow, barely allowing one person with a child to pass. She turned, using her body to block the opening. The space was cramped, the air thin, but for a moment they were safe. The wolves growled, frustrated, sniffing the entrance, their paws scratching the icy rock. But they could not enter. Yakuta's breath was ragged, her body trembled uncontrollably. But the warmth of her great-granddaughter in her arms was a fire that kept her alive. She had succeeded once more. Yakutia had tested her strength, her faith, and she had responded with the unshakable resilience of her lineage, a love that defied death itself. The small rock indentation offered vital refuge. Yakuta felt her great-granddaughter relax, the trembling diminishing with the warmth. Outside, the wolves' growls turned to frustration. They scratched at the rock, sniffed, yellow eyes gleaming, but the passage was too narrow. Yakuta breathed with difficulty, icy air burning her lungs. They had bought some time, a breath of life. The cold, however, was a constant enemy, penetrating bones. Yakuta felt the numbness in her fingers and toes, a cruel reminder of the 80-degree sea. She knew the safety was temporary. The main pack with 1,500 members would not be long. Her great-granddaughter, drowsy, lifted her head, a small, tired smile. "Grandma is safe," she whispered. Yakuta hugged her, a lump in her throat. The child's innocence was both a burden and a blessing. Suddenly a new sound, deep and guttural, cut through the wolves' howling. A grave, powerful growl made the ice vibrate. The scouting wolves stopped, ears perked, growls turning into tense silence. Yakuta felt a chill. Her eyes tried to penetrate the darkness. Then a gigantic shadow emerged from the trees, moving with lethal grace. A Siberian tiger, majestic and terrifying, its striped fur almost invisible, its green eyes fixed on the wolves and the opening. Another shadow appeared, and then another, a group of 5 Siberian tigers with weight and size that defied imagination, predators that made the wolves seem small. The wolves retreated, growling, bodies tense with fear and defiance. The tigers, drawn by the same prey, the scent of human life and the warmth of 2 vulnerable bodies, advanced. The air became charged with primordial tension, an imminent collision of two wild forces. Yakuta felt her heart race, icy panic clutching her chest. They had escaped the wolves only to fall into the sights of something more dangerous. Her great-granddaughter, sensing the change, cried softly. At the height of despair, when the tigers were meters from the entrance, deep growls filling the air, and the wolves prepared to attack, the heavens tore open. A whirlwind of dark feathers descended with deafening fury. A massive flock of crows, hundreds of them, their strident cries cutting through the air. They did not attack Yakuta or the wolves. With surprising ferocity, they plunged upon the Siberian tigers. The crows, defending their territory, attacked the feline's eyes and nostrils with beaks and claws. The tigers, caught by surprise, roared in pain and fury, massive paws batting at the air. The scene transformed into indescribable chaos. Feathers flying, crow cries, tiger growls, and the confused howls of the wolves, who, stunned, retreated. Yakuta, with her great-granddaughter in her arms, saw the opportunity. Nature had granted a miracle. With renewed courage, driven by cunning and unshakable love, she squeezed out of the indentation. The chaos was total, and no one noticed the small figure moving quickly along the edge of the confusion. She ran, urgent steps, towards a cluster of dense trees, a path away from that icy hell. The village was still distant, but the window of opportunity had opened. Yakuta did not look back. The whirlwind of feathers and roars was a distant nightmare, but urgency propelled her steps. She traversed the deep snow, the dense pines offering cover against the darkness and the sounds of the wild battle. The biting air burned her throat, but she pressed on, one step after another, in a desperate dance for life. Her great-granddaughter, frightened, remained silent, her small body a precious weight, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Yakuta felt the small hand clutching her coat, an unbreakable bond of love and trust. The image of the village, with its flickering lights and the warmth of home, was a beacon in her mind, growing clearer with each passing moment. The path was a constant struggle, the snow a heavy obstacle, and the cold penetrated her clothes. Yakuta stumbled, but her staff always saved her. She felt the fatigue in every bone, the exhaustion in every breath, but the idea of giving up was unthinkable. The ancestral promise and the love for her lineage were stronger than any physical pain, and the fury of the crows, an unexpected miracle, had granted her this chance. Suddenly, a faint glow broke through the darkness ahead. It was not the moon nor the stars, but a warm, yellowish glow, dancing on the horizon. The village. A wave of relief so intense almost made her collapse. Warm tears streamed down her wrinkles. Her great-granddaughter, sensing the change, lifted her head. Her eyes, once full of fear, now widened. "Grandma, light," she whispered, her voice thin and weak. Yakuta smiled, a trembling smile of pure joy and exhaustion. "Yes, my little star, it's our home." She pressed the girl against her chest, feeling a new surge of energy. Her steps, though heavy, gained rhythm, propelled by the proximity of safety. The smell of wood smoke, familiar and comforting, began to reach them. In a few minutes, the silhouettes of the first cabins appeared. A stronger light emanated from a window, and Yakuta distinguished figures. Dogs barking, muffled by the cold, reached her ears. They were home. As they approached the first cabin, the door opened. A tall, robust man, her grandson, the girl's father, stepped out with a lantern. His eyes, wide with surprise and relief, fixed on Yakuta and her great-granddaughter. "Grandma! Daughter!" he cried, his voice choked with emotion, running towards them. Other villagers began to emerge, their faces lit by hope and disbelief. Yakuta felt her grandson's strong arms embrace her, carefully taking her great-granddaughter from her arms. The girl, now safe in her father's arms, began to cry, a cry of relief and exhaustion. Yakuta, freed from the weight, felt her legs give way. Warm hands supported her, surrounded by her people, by familiar faces, by a warmth that was not just from the fire, but from love and human connection. She looked at her great-granddaughter, embraced by her father, and a smile of peace spread across her face. The journey was over. The promise had been fulfilled. In the merciless vastness of Yakutia, love, resilience, and nature's unexpected dance had prevailed. The 98-year-old Yakuta elder brought her little star home, reaffirming the strength of the human spirit. The warmth of the village, the smell of smoke, and the presence of family were the sweetest of rewards. The warmth of the village, the smell of smoke, and the presence of family were the sweetest of rewards. Gentle hands supported Yakuta as she staggered, exhaustion finally overcoming her. Her grandson, still with her great-granddaughter firmly nestled in his arms, looked at her with eyes brimming with gratitude and reverence. The girl, her face wet with tears of relief, stretched out a small hand to Yakuta, a gesture of love worth more than 1,000 words. Inside the main cabin, the fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Yakuta was carefully laid on a bed of warm furs, and the village women, with gentle and efficient movements, began to remove her frozen clothes. They massaged her numb limbs, applied herbal ointments to her cracked lips and to her fingers and toes, which slowly regained sensation. Her great-granddaughter, wrapped in soft blankets, was being fed warm broth, her large, dark eyes fixed on her great-grandmother, a small smile of contentment on her lips. Yakuta's grandson, Ivan, knelt beside her, holding her wrinkled hand. "Grandma, you are the strength of our people," he said, his voice choked. "You brought our little star back. How can we thank you?" Yakuta merely squeezed his hand, her eyes tired but full of a serene light. She looked at her great-granddaughter, who was now sleeping peacefully, and felt a wave of profound peace. In the days that followed, the village celebrated the great-granddaughter's return and Yakuta's courage. The elders' stories of how she faced the blizzard, the hungry wolves and the Siberian tigers, and how the crows intervened so unexpectedly, were told and retold around the fires, becoming a new legend. Yakuta, however, remained humble, her ancestral wisdom reminding her that she was merely an instrument of life, driven by a love that transcended fear. She spent hours at her cabin window, watching the snow fall, meditating on the ballet of nature she had witnessed. The crows, the tigers, the wolves, each playing their part in the vast and complex web of life. She understood that survival in Yakutia was not just about strength or cunning, but about the ability to see the invisible, to feel nature's hidden currents, and to accept the most improbable alliances. The fury of the crows, defending their territory, had been a gift, a window of opportunity that nature, in its indifference and magnificence, had granted. Her great-granddaughter, recovered and full of energy, ran around the cabin, her laughter filling the air. Yakuta watched her, a soft smile on her lips. The small spark of hope of her lineage was safe, and with it, the promise of a future for her people. The journey had been the cruelest ordeal of her life, but also the most revealing. She had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a resilience that echoed that of her ancestors. In the merciless vastness of Yakutia, where eternal winter would continue to freeze the very soul, Yakuta had reaffirmed the deepest truth, that love, family, and human connection were the true beacons in the darkness, capable of defying nature itself and bringing hope back home, even at 80 degrees. Her heart, once so heavy, now beat with a lightness and gratitude that filled every fiber of her being. Life continued, a silent testament to the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Days turned into weeks, and weeks transformed into a winter that, though relentless, now seemed imbued with a new light for the village. Yakuta, recovered from physical exhaustion, felt a renewed vitality, not just in her aged body, but in her spirit. Her great-granddaughter, with her contagious energy, was living proof that hope, however fragile it seemed, would always find a way. The girl's laughter echoed through Yakuta's cabin, a sweet sound that chased away the icy silence of Yakutia. Ivan, her grandson, often visited her, bringing hot tea and her great-granddaughter to play by her side. His eyes, once marked by worry, now shone with deep admiration. "Grandma," he said one day, as they watched the great-granddaughter draw in the snow with a branch, "your story has changed us all. We've learned that strength isn't just in muscles, but in the faith and love that binds us." Yakuta smiled, a gesture that further wrinkled the corners of her eyes, but conveyed immense peace. She knew that the true lesson wasn't about her individual courage, but about the interconnectedness of everything. The village, in turn, had transformed. The fires were not just for warmth, but for gathering, for sharing. Yakuta's stories of the crow's fury and nature's unexpected ballet had become more than legends. They were living teachings. Hunters, venturing onto the tundra, looked at the sky and the tracks in the snow with new reverence, understanding that nature was both adversary and ally, and that wisdom lay in deciphering its signs. Women, as they wove and cooked, spoke of Yakuta's strength, drawing inspiration from her resilience to face their own challenges. Yakuta spent her afternoons sitting by the window, observing the white landscape, which once seemed only a challenge, but now revealed itself as a vast book of mysteries and miracles. She saw the crows circling in the sky, their dark silhouettes against the white, and felt a deep connection with them, with the wolves, with the tigers, with every creature that inhabited that extreme world. There was no more fear, only a serene understanding that all were part of a larger cycle, an ancestral dance where every step, however chaotic it seemed, had a purpose. Her great-granddaughter, growing every day, was the embodiment of this new era of understanding. Yakuta taught her about the stars, about the legends of her people, about the importance of respecting the land and all its inhabitants. The girl, with her curious eyes, absorbed every word, every gesture, promising to carry forward the flame of her great-grandmother's wisdom. On a clear night, under the aurora borealis that painted the sky green and purple, Yakuta sat by the fire with her family. The warmth of the fire, her great-granddaughter's laughter, and Ivan's presence were the culmination of her journey. She had faced the deepest darkness and found the brightest light. Yakutia, with its 80 continued to be a place of trials, but Yakuta had proven that the human spirit, fueled by love and connection, was capable of melting the thickest ice and flourishing even in the harshest conditions. Her heart, filled with gratitude, knew that the story of her lineage would continue, strong and resilient, like the tundra itself. She had brought hope back home, not just for her great-granddaughter, but for the entire village, a legacy of love and overcoming that would echo through future generations, a beacon of light in the icy vastness, a testament to the indomitable force of life.